Geetha, who's a good friend as well, took on the mantle of CEO of this incredible organization just, a year ago, I think? Yeah, January 1st, 9 months ago. And so Geetha Murali is going to talk about her journey at Room to Read. Geetha?
Is this on? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Amar, for having me here today. The team asked me to talk a little bit about my journey and what it's like to be a CEO of a global nonprofit. So I'll sprinkle a little bit of that in and tell you a little bit of, about a few other things that are on my mind today. Today is actually one of my most favorite days of the year, and that is because it's International Literacy Day. And as the CEO of an international literacy organization, that's sort of like your birthday and New Year's and Diwali all wrapped up into one. And I'm very honored to be here with all of you to celebrate this occasion. And MR, I might ask you for a box of sweets later to celebrate. Yes. But no, seriously, on International Literacy Day, I'm compelled to reflect on the importance of the role of reading and how that's affected me as a leader and a leader of a literacy organization. Research has shown that reading, particularly reading fiction, makes you more empathetic as a person. And I read a lot, and my habit of reading has definitely put me in a position to understand, empathize, reflect on people with different perspectives. And that's pretty much everyone, because there's very few Indian American women who started their career as a statistician and have found themselves as a CEO of an international nonprofit. So when I think about what empathy means to me, I step back and start at those first moments in my career when I was a statistician. And yes, you heard me right, I was a statistician and made this journey. And so I'm going to tell you a couple of really powerful numbers that stand out that I'm pretty proud of. The children on Room to Read programs read 2 to 3 times as fast as children in comparison schools. The girls on our girls' education program graduate, transition into tertiary and into employment at rates of 70%. That from communities that typically see graduation and transition rates of 10 to 20%. In India particularly, we've reached 4 million children, and almost 40% of our workforce, which is now 1,600 people, are sitting in India and working for our programs there. We're about to launch our India Development Board, which will join a network of regional boards around the world in places like London and Sydney and Hong Kong and Singapore. So having an Indian background has definitely been a career advantage for me. So too has my gender been an advantage. Research shows that women leaders tend to be more empathetic than their male peers. And when I think about what empathy means to me, and particularly to Room to Read, it really is about building and cultivating relationships. People say, it's not personal, it's just business. But business is very personal because we make decisions every day about who we want to work with, how hard we want to work for them or with them. And that all comes down to whether we can put ourselves in another person's shoes, whether we can aspire to work for the goals that are bigger than ourselves. And for the philanthropic sector, that's about connections between investors and causes, connections between our beneficiaries and our cause, and that connection becomes the engine that drives every move that we make. Room to Read has staff in 19 countries around the world. And when I think about the relationships that I have with our staff, be it with a social mobilizer who's mentoring girls in Delhi, or a literacy director in Tanzania, or a fundraiser in Zurich, those relationships are what give me joy in my workplace. I talk a lot about the importance of joy in the workplace and that as a value, and that shouldn't be confused with fun. Many of you are parents like me, and raising children can be very joyful, but it's not always fun. Joy to me is really that sense of collective achievement of all of us working together towards a goal that's much bigger than ourselves. Room to Read is very well known for its big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs, as they're called. Our most recent one was to set a goal of reaching 15 million children by 2020. I can thankfully say that we've accomplished that mission, check. We've done that 2 years early, and we're now setting our sights even further on eradicating childhood illiteracy in our lifetimes. Many people look at our scale and the impacts we've had on government systems. They look at the ability we've had to have larger NGOs tap our best practices, and they assume that we're a behemoth organization with tentacles everywhere. But our budget of $55 million per year is actually quite modest compared to larger international organizations like UNICEF and Save the Children that are operating with budgets 10x that. What we do have is a program model that's highly scalable and replicable all over the world. What we're rich in is relationships that we've cultivated over time. I've been very fortunate to work with some of the top executives around the world in for-profit organizations to learn from them on what inspires and motivates them to give their best professionally, but also what motivates them to give back to the social sector. We've worked with organizations like Reliance for our office space, like IKEA for our program development, Ketchum for PR, Jones Day for legal, the top minds in the world supporting our efforts to achieve our BHAGs. And in the end, when I step back and reflect on the trajectory that we've traveled, very much from a scrappy startup that was first invested in by Draper Richards, and perhaps if we were a for-profit, we would have filed for our IPO. I was actually fortunate in July to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange for Nelson Mandela's 100th birthday. And I figure that's as close to an IPO as one gets. And when we think of our staff, they might not have woken up the next day millionaires because of that successful IPO, but they are full of joy, rich with social impact, and I think that's one of the most joyful positions that anyone can have. So thank you very much for listening to me. Happy to answer a couple of questions, if there are any.
Questions?
I was so clear.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Oh, there's one in the back.
Yes.
Can you define literacy?
Sure. Well, everyone has their definition. Programmatically for us, it's reading with fluency by the end of grade 2. And we do that at 45 words per minute roughly, although we're doing some research if you want to get into the technicalities of it on what is fluency in different languages around the world. Other questions? Comments? Thank you.
Thanks, Geetha. Okay, that concludes our philanthropy session. We are now going to take a break.